important. And if you can understand this concept, it is going to make the rest of the topics so much easier. And the reason that I talk about everything at the cellular level, let's think about this for a second. Because in some way, each of you are going into something with the medical profession. Patient A presents with symptoms. What's usually some of the first stuff that's going to happen with patient A at the doctor's office or the emergency room or whatever the case might be? Well,
Change their vital signs.
vital signs, labs. Yeah, well, vital signs are going to help. Yeah, you definitely want to check and make sure they're breathing, you know. Labs. Anybody in here had labs done? Yes. Okay, I'm sure we had. What kind of information do we get from labs that are performed? At what level are they checking stuff? They're checking at the cellular level. Because if they draw the blood, what kind of stuff can they determine? I say stuff, but job materials, okay? What kind of things can they learn about? What chemicals?
Like we see that a lot of white blood cells in infection.
Okay. White blood cells. Some things could show up as proteins.
Cholesterol.
Cholesterol.
Whether or not you're vaccinated, so I said,
My ions. Now, do you happen to remember about ions from part 1? Huh? Vaguely. Okay, well, how about why are they called an ion? What? They're charged. What does that mean? They're going to react, but what kind of charges?
Negative.
Pluses and minuses. Those little ions. Do you happen to remember any of them that were kind of specific? Sodium, potassium,
magnesium.
sodium, potassium, magnesium. We had quite a few that we talked about. 2 that, of course, were made. Well, there's another one. Does anybody remember what calcium? You probably remember those from part 1. Why? What needs them to function?
Muscles,
Muscles?
nerves,
Nerves?
Brain.
bone.
Bone? Now, let's look at what we just heard of nerve, muscle.
And then brain. Maybe.
Definitely, because we're going to continue that. We're going to continue it with the nervous system. Can we do a whole lot without either of those? You hopefully learned in part 1 there are two systems that control the body. Nervous is one, endocrine is second. You didn't learn about endocrine yet, okay, so you can't know that. But hopefully you learned in part one the connection of nerves to muscles, specifically our skeletal muscles, okay? Hopefully you kind of dipped a little bit or heard a little bit about it for our viscera, but you shouldn't have gotten too deep into that in part one. But you definitely should have learned about this in part one, and hopefully learned about it at the level of my plasma membrane. That plasma membrane, what's the structure of it? Y'all speak up, I'm getting older, I'm losing my hair.
Is it the lipid, the two layers of the phospholipids?
A phospholipid bilayer. So you have your phospholipids, that form a layer. You'll have the outside of the cell, the inside. The outside of the cell is a kind of, it's a fluid environment. The inside of the cell is a fluid environment. The inside of the cell tends to have a bit of a negative charge because of proteins. What in the inside of the cell codes for proteins? If we think back to our primitive drawing, the animal cell, okay, where does information on proteins come from? Huh? What? Ribosomes are going to help make them. What codes for them?
Nucleus?
Nucleus, RNA, but what carries the actual code? DNA. So the DNA, those little chromosomes that are inside, okay, well, I did it inside my nucleolus. All right, let's bring my little chromosomes. Does everybody remember those? If we take a chromosome, all right, on that chromosome were sections called a gene. Does everybody remember that? That gene code, the only thing a gene can code for is a protein. That's it. It cannot code for anything else because it's the proteins that carry out the work of the cell. Okay? Now, at any point in time, you're over 50% proteins. They're very important to the body. So, that gene, which has the DNA, the basis, this is where RNA will come in, read it, leave, go to my endoplasmic reticulum. If needed, go to ribosomes, depending upon whether that protein needs to stay inside the cell or leave the cell, okay, would determine, is it going to be just ribosomes, or am I going to have my endoplasmic reticulum? Then it goes to my Golgi apparatus, and then it gets shipped. Everybody remember that? So your cell is coding for the proteins. Proteins are going to do all the work. it's going to create the proteins that we have in our plasma membrane. So, in my phospholipid bilayer, phosphate head, lipid tail, creates a beautiful environment. Okay? Beautiful environment. Embedded into this plasma membrane are proteins. Roughly 7 different types of proteins exist that live in the plasma membrane. And the entire cell, that plasma membrane, which is the surrounding, okay, and the proteins that are embedded, those proteins have a job. So, if you look at the pictures, the handout that I gave you, the top picture that you're looking at, does anybody remember that from part 1?
Mm-hmm.
This top picture, do you remember that the plasma membrane was called the fluid mosaic model? Fluid, because it looks like stuff's doing this all around the cell, all right? Mosaic, because of everything that you see embedded, all right? Because if you think of something that's mosaic, it's got all this different stuff in it. Now, if you, and I got to get my glasses, okay? This is another way of showing you my age, okay? Got to get the good old bifocals, all right? Let's take a peek at some of this, okay? They're trying to show me in the top picture. They're trying to show me my phospholipid bilayer. They're trying to show me some different types of proteins that are there. Some of them look like they're just little tiny proteins stuck in there. One of them looks like it's got this channel going down through the middle of it, okay? But something else I want you to take quick note of, because we're going to come back to this in future chapters. Do you see how they're showing all of these sugar chains? The little green things existing out of that plasma membrane. Do you remember that? Okay. The reason that we're going to come back to those, note that they're trying to let you know that the little green chain is a carbohydrate chain, okay, sugar, okay. You'll see some of the chains are attached to an actual membrane, an actual protein. Some of them are attached to one of the little phospholipids. So that means they're going to either be called a glyco. See how they've got the one listed that says glycoprotein? That's letting us know that that carbohydrate chain is attached to a protein embedded in the plasma membrane. But then you see the one that's titled a glycolipid. That means that that carbohydrate chain is attached to a lipid portion of this plasma membrane. These become important because when we get to learning about how cells communicate, these are important. These carbohydrate